95 Live.
At Expo Centre Sharjah.
Hello and welcome back right here to Pulse 95, broadcasting live at the Sharjah Expo Center. This is the International Photography Festival, XPOSURE, the world of photography and film right here in Sharjah. I'm joined with my guest co-host, Mike Browne.
I'm still here, still causing trouble.
And we're also joined here by another legend in the industry. This is Jeffery Garriock. Welcome to the show.
Legend, bit of a strong word, but nice to be here.
No,
I'd say it's a good word.
I'd say like a legend in the travel in photography, because you've been traveling across the world. Just to give you guys a bit of a brief, Jeffery is a Toronto-based cinematographer and photographer specializing in travel and documentaries, and has focused on telling environmental, scientific, and human interest stories in more than 60 countries around the world. Now that to say you're not a legend, I think it's a humble brag, you could say.
Oh, maybe. Well, I'm happy I have you to say those things about me, and I don't have to say them myself.
Yes, I mean, for anything, your work speaks for itself. You were here previously at XPOSURE. You had your exhibition for Chernobyl at the time. I was there, and I was always coming back to your exhibition. There was always something to look at, and I was always awestruck by it. And I'm so happy, and we're honored to have you back here again. I know it's been a couple of years, and I'm sure a couple of travels as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a few less travels than usual, just because of the nature of what's been going on in the world. But fortunately, I was very lucky that about midway through 2020, things started getting going again, and so I've been back and forth to Africa a few times. I just did a project in the Maldives the week before last, and so I've been starting to spool up again back to the sort of normal speed of travel. But that's very lucky. I feel very lucky to be invited back. It's incredible to be here, and there's no other show like this in the world in terms of the scale and the quality of the photography that comes along to this.
That is absolutely great to hear. Mike Browne is also a man of the world, a traveler on the motorbike.
Yeah, I mean, I've traveled into all sorts of places. My thing has always been education, teaching, trying to turn little light bulbs on for people, getting to see something in a different way just by thinking like photographers. But you are turning light bulbs on for people by telling some extraordinary stories. What made you so fascinated with storytelling, whether it be through photography or film?
I think being fortunate to work with a lot of really wonderful storytellers and a lot of really wonderful people, and they're sort of the folks who helped kind of push me into that next level. When I first started traveling, it was in terms of advertising and commercial work, that sort of thing. So, you're there to take the pretty picture to make the company look great, and there's nothing wrong with that, but in order to elevate that, it's way more valuable, and you make a way greater connection if you can bring something back. And I would say particularly my time working with Photographers Without Borders, and in particular with its founder Danielle De Silva, she was really instrumental in focusing me more onto storytelling and how to do that in just a photo or in just a few photos, or maybe in a photo with a bit of text, and how much more of a connection people can make with the photography if the focus is on the storytelling. So I would credit her, and I would credit some other wonderful folks that I've worked with for the focus there. But now it's all that I talk about. My focus group I did the other day was photography and storytelling, and I think I try to put that at the center of everything I do.
What is it that it gives you? Because, there's always a two-way street. We want to tell stories. We want to show people more of the incredible things that are going on in this wonderful, beautiful world. I mean, your exhibition from last time we met at XPOSURE, Chernobyl, not only is it a tragedy, there's incredible beauty within what is going on there, the way nature is reclaiming it. How do you feel when you tell these stories?
For me, it's that I'm very fortunate that I get to have these experiences. I get to be on the ground, see the thing, meet the person, and the story happens to me. And it could end there, and I feel like that's a shame if that's the case, because there are so many people who don't get to have these experiences, and there are so many people who never leave their own country, or even just aren't afforded the access that we get as photographers and as storytellers sometimes. Like I was on that Chernobyl project, I was able to speak to some people up close that if you were to go and be a tourist, you'd never have that opportunity. And so I feel like there's a great sense of responsibility since I'm having these unique and up-close experiences all over the world, that the least I can do is try and bring them back and bring them to life a little bit. And I think it's also just, it makes for a lot more interesting conversation, if nothing else, because otherwise people say things to you like, how was Chernobyl? And you say, it was good.
Empty.
Empty. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get it. And it's a lovely, generous sort of human spirit to want to share these stories with people. Because, of course, you can go to Chernobyl as a tourist now, which I guess you couldn't do when you were there. But or even the tourist visit, you say you're never going to connect with what really happened, with the people who still live there, the surroundings and the devastation.
Yeah, I actually tacked on a few extra days after the project was over, and a friend of mine came over from Belgium, and we did go as tourists. And I was very interested in trying to see how different the experience was going to be. And the thing that hit me the hardest was the sensationalism. People have all decided before they come what it's like there, and they've all made up their minds. And then these tours that you go on just reinforce that they're carrying Geiger counters and wearing gas masks, and they give you things with caution radioactive on them, and it's really just not a favorable representation of what the place is really like. And when you speak to the people who are living there and spending time there and working there now still to this day, because work is still being done, it's not this, you mustn't touch radioactive bubble. It's a living, breathing place, and people are still doing work and research. The very forefront of radiation research and containment and storage is all being done there, because what better place to study? And also the fallout from this event, even though it was many years ago, is still being felt with a lot of these families, and that's something that a lot of the sensationalized tourist stuff doesn't really address. So it's an important,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. This is like, that I find quite fascinating, because when, of course, that disaster happened, everyone's told, the region's going to be uninhabitable for the next 100,000 years and no one can go there. And here you are telling a story actually of regrowth and rebirth, and that people are still with there.
The thing that struck me the most, I think, was that the disaster was, I feel bad for not having this off the top of my head, I think it was 84. But the plant didn't close down until 2000, because it was 4 reactors, and the other 3 were perfectly fine. So somebody needed to work there. And people are saying, oh, no, but you can't. It has to be abandoned. It has to be closed off. And it's like, yeah, but somebody's got to supply power to that part of Ukraine. And so, in spite of how dangerous it may have been, people needed to be there, needed to work there, and the Soviet Union built an incredible city called Slavutich just a train ride away outside of the exclusion zone for all of these people to live, and they built it almost overnight, but it had to go on. And that's the sort of nature of life, I think, is in spite of the danger, we have to go on. We tend to think of these events as like, okay, Chernobyl is a thing that happened and it's over now. And I think that's a big mistake. Chernobyl is a place, it exists still, and those stories carry on.
I think, life has to go on. I think that's probably a message, actually, from the whole of the Exposure International Photography Festival. Can I ask, so which came first, the film or the photography?
For me, it was very much the film, and photography was sort of something I did on the side for fun, because filmmaking would take me to somewhere really wonderful, and then you might have 5 minutes to yourself, and I would always carry my stills camera, or sometimes it's the same camera for both, and you make a point to say, okay, I'm going to take this picture, this will be for me. And I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy the photography so much, is because for quite a long time, it felt to me like a hobby, because it was something I would do to take a break from the work. And I mean, now I'm still 90% video and 10% stills, but the stills increasingly are becoming a part of the work, and so I'm working hard to retain that joy and never make it feel like a job. Because don't get me wrong, I love making films, and I always am very excited to do it, but sometimes it's work.
For most of your travels, you've captured a lot of vast landscapes, remote wastelands, but you also specialize in venturing deep underwater into the ocean. You specialize in ocean photography, and I wanted to ask you, how does that differ? What new sense of danger comes from that? Because the ocean can be such an unknown place, even to this day,
Very unknown. I think as in the case with many other things, the biggest danger in the ocean generally is still us. We're the biggest danger to the ocean, and we're also sort of the biggest obstacle to overcome in visiting the ocean. I tend not to think of it in terms of a dangerous place to visit, but more of a difficult place to visit, because we're not really designed to spend long periods of time underwater, which is unfortunately what I really like doing. So there's a lot more of everything. Like from a filmmaking perspective, if you need to bring one camera to do something on land, you need to bring that camera, and then you need to bring a housing for it, and then you need to bring yourself and everything to get you underwater. So that's all of your dive equipment. And then if something gets wet, it might not function anymore, so you need to bring spares. So really it's just more and more difficult. But I don't know. Not to say that it isn't dangerous, but danger is very rarely at the forefront. And most of that can be mitigated by preparing and having redundancy and having backup and really thinking it through and going safely, you know?
The Exposure here has hosted its first ever conservation summit titled Saving Our Oceans. Have you been involved in this summit in any way?
Yeah, I was really lucky to get to speak on the panel, actually, with a lot of people whose careers I have followed for many, many years. I sat on the panel between Jen Hayes and Laurent Balesta, and that was a very humbling experience, but it was really great. It was really great to see that, for the most part, all of these great natural history and conservation photographers are of one mind in terms of saving the oceans, and more than that, in terms of bringing hope to people. Because unfortunately, like I spoke about the other day, so many messages about ocean conservation are very grim and very bleak, and that's because that is the case. Things are not going great for the ocean, and it's very difficult to get people to care about the ocean, especially if you don't live next to it. But unfortunately, it's an ocean planet. 70% of the planet is ocean, so the ocean affects all of us. And so I was really pleased to hear that people are very happy to bring hope along, even though a lot of the messages are difficult.
Hope, I think, is a really great keyword here as well, bringing hope to the planet and trying to show there's a little bit of positive stuff we can do as a species. As you said, the most dangerous creature in the ocean is us, and I think in other places. But can I move a little bit further forward and out of the water and into somewhere hot?
Sure.
So you just happened to mention earlier you're up to something in Africa. Are you able to tell us anything about what you're doing there?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, so there's most of what I do in Africa is unrelated to ocean conservation, but there's one project in particular that is ocean conservation that's very close to my heart. In Mozambique, it's a project called Love the Oceans, founded by my great friend and brilliant conservationist Francesca Trotman. And what I love about what she's doing is it taught me a lot about what ocean conservation looks like, because I think we imagine it to be it's beautiful animals in a beautiful habitat, or it's beautiful animals in a difficult habitat, and that's why we need to work on it. But she works enormously with the community there, and I think that's so important, because if the community can change the way that it behaves or the way that it works, or they can change their relationship or foster a better relationship, that long term is how we're going to solve some of these problems. Because an NGO, no matter how well intentioned or how well resourced, can only do so much. At the end of the day, it's the people who live there, who work there, who spend all their time there, and the next generation of them and the following generation that are going to create lasting change. And so she's done a really wonderful job of creating relationships in this community, centering the voices of this community. And one man in particular named Pascal, who's from the community of Jangamo, has become an enormous leader. He works with her in Love the Oceans. He has helped spearhead education initiatives in the community. He's helped work with the Department of Fisheries to try and create better relationships with fishermen who are doing things unsustainably. And recently, he's now working on his training to become a dive master, so that when the area becomes a marine protected area, he will be able to still contribute in a meaningful way, in a way that respects the oceans without taking from them.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you. We have to rewire ourselves to the environment around us and the impact that we do to it before anything can, for any change to really take place. Which is why I'd love everyone to check out the Conservation Summit right here, Save Our Oceans. We have a whole exhibition there. It's something to put into perspective, and you talk about Like it's not enough to have some sort of stereotypical idea of the world around you. You need to redefine your perspective.
And listen, I think that's so important. I think one failure, and I've certainly been guilty of this in the past, when you want to help or when you care about something a lot, you decide in advance what's the best thing to do. There's an example I like to use is a number of NGOs will invite folks from Western countries to developing countries, and they'll say, come build a well and provide water, particularly in African countries. And that sounds wonderful on the surface, but it isn't always what the village or the community needs. But we have this idea. It's like, you know what? We'll go build a well, and we'll provide water, and that'll be great. And what we should be doing is going and saying, I would like to help you improve your community. What do you need? What are you asking for? What's difficult for you? And so I think it's really important that we start leaving behind the things we think we've decided. And if you care about the ocean and you want to work on conserving the ocean, speak to a community that works in the ocean or that lives in the ocean.
And, this is up to every single one of us as an individual, because, come out of Africa, come out of the more regional communities. Look at all the stuff that's landing in the oceans from us in the cities, all those detergents, all that kind of stuff. Now, I know many manufacturers are saying we're eco-friendly, and the word eco-friendly has become something of a marketing slogan. Buy our stuff, we'll save the turtles.
Yeah, and I think that can be a difficult trap as well, because what does eco-friendly mean? You know? Every country has different definitions. Advertising always offers you different things that you're allowed to say, depending on where you are. And I mean, it's a game of thresholds, right? Because, let's say you make a plastic bottle. It's like, okay, this is recycled plastic, so this is a good bottle. How much of it is recycled plastic? Is it 10%? Is it 80%? Is that enough? These are the questions I feel like nobody's asking. We're just very keen to slap an eco-friendly label and carry on. And the thing is, these are not local problems, even though they have to be dealt with locally. The beach trash that we clean up at Mozambique does not just come from Mozambique. We're picking up things that are on the ocean gyres coming from Singapore and coming from ships out of China and from all over the place. So this if it goes in the ocean, it becomes a global problem. So it needs to be global solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on being able to persuade the global economy, if you like, that, you know what, some of this stuff is really, really bad, whether it's a plastic bag. I've spent a lot of time in Asia, and, the plastic bottles are lying around all over the place. And, of course, a lot of them end up in the ocean and the rivers. They go in the rivers, they end up in the ocean, because they're not set up to be able to deal with it. The local people are used to having their food in a banana leaf, and they chuck it by the side of the road, and the banana leaf just goes back into the environment. What are your thoughts about helping the world, if you like, the developed world, in realizing, we just got to stop making this stuff in the first place?
I think it goes back to why we're here at all. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this conservation summit if we didn't think we could do something. And it's tough because I don't know what the answer is. If you put world leaders in front of me here and you gave me 5 minutes to speak to them, I'd have a load of stuff to say. But I don't know if I have all the solutions. I feel like it needs to be a partnership between us in the creative community, those in the scientific community, and the local communities that this affects. Because in your example, I think some of it might be as simple as using banana leaves as packaging. I feel like that wouldn't be that hard. And it's something that you win on a number of levels because it's a local crop, it's sustainably grown, the locals have experience growing it, so it'll create jobs. You're making food, of which we can always use more on a population, 7 billion of humans on the planet, and so that just sounds like an easy solution. There's got to be some products that can be packaged that way. Right?
I'm absolutely sure of it. I mean, I am, with the grey hair and all the rest of it, I mean, I can't believe it. I'm 60 in a couple of days' time. How did that happen? But, we didn't have plastic bottles of things when I was a kid. It was glass, and it was genuinely recycled because that's where the glass came from. And people had shopping baskets that were woven out of stuff. And everything has become very next, very, very fast. And convenience, it seems. Humanity sells its soul for convenience. And we got this incredible system which is keeping us alive, and how much we depend on all the other creatures within the oceans, from the tiniest little microscopic things. up to the the reefs and all the rest of it. The oceans breathe, don't they?
They do. And we breathe in great part thanks to phytoplankton. Most of the air that we breathe is generated by the ocean. But I think, to what you're saying, I think it's, we need to be willing to put the work in, but we as individual people can't be tasked with solving this on our own.
It's a group effort, isn't it?
Yes, but it's also, it needs to come from the top as well. If we're going to go and put the effort in and we're going to have our reusable shopping bags and drink things out of glass bottles, that's well and good and a good step, and anyone who does that, I'm proud of you. Keep doing it. But it needs to go both ways, and the companies that you're going to buy your groceries from, they need to offer that to you. They need to provide recycling programs for that. They need to make the effort to come and collect these bottles. If we're going to, because convenience, it is king, and it's hard to, or harder to do these things. So it needs to be a commitment on both sides. If we say we're going to move to sustainable solutions, big corporations, governments, they need to move towards them too.
I couldn't agree more. It has to come from the top, because the individual cannot force the governments or the manufacturers to do things. But it drives me nuts sometimes, because everybody looks at the turtle with the plastic thing stuck caught around its neck, and the seals, when they get these plastic bands and they grow into them and eventually strangle themselves. People say, I know, it's dreadful, it's terrible, and do you want a bag of crisps? And it's kind of like, convenience is the buzzword. Humanity seems very against giving up a bit of convenience in order to save their own children and the next generations. And the governments, of course, want votes.
Well, and we're very disconnected, I think, from the consequences of convenience. I think if you threw, the top of a soft drink can holder into the trash and it landed on the neck of a turtle, I think we'd feel differently about it.
Absolutely.
But we don't have that. We don't have that follow through from one end of the problem to the other. And I think that's one of the ways that conservation photography hopefully helps people, is by visualizing the connection between what we do and what we throw away and how that then affects the ocean.
Jeffery Garriock, an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show. I feel like with this conversation, there's a lot that could be said about what we can do by ourselves, what we can do as a group, and you're part of that movement, and we're so happy to see you continue in that endeavor. And to all the future endeavors, we wish you all the best and hope to see you again at next year Exposure after a few more travels, and I'm sure with a lot more insightful experiences as well.
I'm looking forward to that. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully I'll be here again.
Always
Likewise.
great. Always great talking to you.
Let's take a bit of a break, and coming up next, we have yet another guest to converse with right here on